Most South Africans assume circumcision is ancient, universal, and simply African. But what if everything you think you know is wrong? The largest ethnic group in South Africa, the Zulu, rejected circumcision for nearly 200 years, a historical silence that still surprises scholars today. Was this a cultural choice, a political decision, or a historical accident? Globally, about 30% of men are circumcised, mostly for religious reasons. Across Africa, male circumcision is primarily cultural, performed as a rite of passage into manhood. And here's the kicker. This traditional male circumcision is done in non-clinical settings by people with no formal medical training, blending pain, endurance, and social instruction in ways most outsiders will never see. Circumcision is far from uniform. Some communities perform it in infancy, some in adolescence, some adapt it fully, others abandon or modify it. And despite what most believe, circumcision is not exclusively male. Female initiation and genital rites exist across Africa, revealing a cultural history far more complex than the simple stories we're told. So, if you think you know what circumcision is, think again. What begins as a simple cultural act turns out to be a window into history, identity, power, and survival. And by the end of this video, nothing about it will seem familiar. Before there were borders, before there were written records, and long before Europe arrived on the continent, Africans were already formalizing adulthood through ritual. Circumcision in Africa is ancient, but unlike Europe or the Middle East, its history was preserved largely through oral tradition, not text. That absence of writing does not mean the absence of practice. One of the earliest surviving written records comes much later, not because the rituals were new, but because Europeans had only just begun documenting them. In 1668, Dutch geographer Alfred Dapper, drawing from accounts from as early as 1628, described the Sunday Women's Initiation Society of the Cape Mount region in present-day Liberia. These were not casual customs, they were structured initiations where bodily modification, secrecy, and instructions marked a girl's transformation into a recognized adult woman. This matters because it tells us something crucial. Initiation in Africa was already institutionalized centuries before colonial rule. The writing is late, the system is not. Across West Africa, parallel institutions such as Poro for men and Sunday for women organized adulthood through seclusion, bodily rights, discipline, and social education. These societies spread across what is now Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire, adapting as they moved, but always answering the same question: how does a community turn a child into an adult? The key takeaway here is simple but destabilizing. Circumcision in Africa did not begin with religion, medicine, or Europe. It began as a social technology. Here's where most stories go wrong. Circumcision didn't spread across Africa in a straight line. There was no single origin point, no conveyor belt moving rituals from one region to another unchanged. Instead, ideas moved, not instructions. Initiation systems like Poro and Sunday didn't expand because one group conquered another, but because neighboring societies observed, adapted, and reshaped them. Some adopted the full ritual structure, others borrowed only parts, some rejected them entirely. Over time, the practice mutated. The same pattern appears further south. Bantu-speaking societies of Central and Southern Africa show deep evidence of age-grade systems, warrior initiation, and circumcision, but not in identical forms. Linguistic and ethnographic research suggests circumcision was once more widespread among Bantu groups, later abandoned by some, intensified by others, and reshaped to fit local ideas of masculinity, power, and discipline. This is the pattern across the continent. Circumcision travels with people, changes with environment, and survives only where it continues to make social sense. So, when similarities appear between regions, they aren't accidents, but they're also not proof of a singular source. By the time circumcision takes root in southern Africa, it is no longer just a ritual, it is a system of education. Among the Xhosa, Tswana, and Pedi, circumcision becomes embedded in initiation schools, often called bush schools, secluded spaces where initiates are removed from society, disciplined, instructed, and symbolically remade. These institutions predate colonial rule and function as a mechanism for social order, masculinity, and responsibility. As Nelson Mandela later reflected, initiation spaces like the Boma were not only sites for physical transition, but vehicles for social solidarity and political consciousness, even during colonialism and apartheid. Land was set aside for them because communities recognized their role in nation building, not just tradition. But Southern Africa was never uniform. The Zulus stand as the most striking exception. In the early 19th century, King Shaka suspended full circumcision, viewing the healing period as a military weakness. Over time, non-circumcision became identity. This is not for our culture. Some Zulu communities practice ukugweta, a partial modification, others none at all. Only in the 20th century did circumcision return, largely through clinical public health campaigns, not traditional schools. Southern Africa then isn't a single story, it's a map of choices, adaptation, rejection, modification, shaped by politics, warfare, and survival. Circumcision is often discussed as a male issue, but African initiation has never been gender neutral. In West Africa, Sunday societies structured female initiation alongside male rites, using bodily transformation, secrecy, and instruction to define womanhood and social responsibilities. These weren't side rituals, they were centralized institutions governing morality, marriage, and adulthood. Even for male circumcision, it carried gendered symbolism. Among groups like the Xhosa, Dogon, and Dowayo, the foreskin is understood as a feminine element, and its removal, combined with endurance tests, marks a symbolic production of masculinity. Circumcision here is not about hygiene, it's about identity. Today, these gendered rights sit at the center of controversy, health risks, human rights debates, and state intervention. Yet, despite scrutiny, they persist because they do something medicine alone cannot. They answer the question rituals have always answered: who are you now and who do you belong to? By now, we've traced the long history and continent-wide logic of initiation. This is where circumcision stops being an idea and becomes an experience, a journey through pain, silence, transformation, and rebirth that marks the boundary between childhood and adulthood. For most cultures in Southern Africa that practice traditional male initiation, this journey begins not in a clinic, but in preparation and separation. It is rarely random. Age matters, but family and community all influence when a young man is ready, typically between the ages of 16 and 23. This isn't a medical appointment, it's a social deadline, the age at which a boy is called to become a man. Before the blade ever touches the skin, initiation is already a full body event. potential initiates gather under community direction to learn traditional songs, herd cattle, collect firewood, cut saplings, and fashion the ropes that will help construct the iboma, the secluded hut where they will live during the initiation. Also, working for the chief, proving physical capability and obedience. Here, work itself becomes a ritual. The community mobilizes around initiates transitioning. Men construct the iboma, women thatch it, and everyone participates in marking this young man's pathway away from childhood. The iboma is placed far from the village, deliberately isolated. Its location is chosen by the chief, and the separation matters. The hut stands as a threshold of identity, a liminal space between who he was and who he is about to become. They paint their bodies with ochre, wear ceremonial headdresses, and roam the countryside in act of symbolic mischief, the last remnant of boyhood before discipline and responsibility. The ceremony often begins with a feast or a slaughter of a cattle, led in procession by experienced warriors carrying decorated sticks. Elders formally warn the initiates, your childish ways are behind you. From this point on, you must act as a man. The initiates are stripped of their clothes and washed clean, not just of dirt, but of identity. Then comes the part outsiders often fixate on, the circumcision itself. The initiate is told to show no fear. In many cultures, it is considered a disgrace to grimace or show pain. When the inqibi, the circumciser, cuts, the initiate declares, I am a man, and the inqibi replies, you are a man. This verbal affirmation is part of the rite. It makes the pain meaningful rather than meaningless. Once the foreskin is removed, it is either destroyed or buried, not for hygiene, but to protect the initiates from evil spirits and witches in the cultural imagination. The wound is wrapped with izikwe, a plant that is believed to have antibiotic and pain-relieving properties, blending traditional medicine with the ritual process. The cut is not the climax, it is the entrance into seclusion. Afterwards, the initiate remains in the iboma under the care of the appointed guardians, the ikankata. Uninitiated young men from the village bring food, wood, and water. Everyone participates in the collective effort of supporting the initiate's transformation. During this time, they must avoid contact with married women and they must not speak ill of others. Both rules create a psychological discipline that mirrors the physical one, teaching restraint, respect, and focus. When the healing is completed, the chief returns. The white ochre that once covered the initiate is washed away and replaced with red ochre, signaling masculine identity and strength. The chief then leads the newly initiated men away from their huts, often riding a horse and firing a gun, a public display of authority and paternal power meant to reaffirm social structure and community roles. Finally, the iboma is burned. This is not destruction. The hut stands for boyhood and separation. Once burned, it cannot be revisited, and the youth is symbolically and literally forbidden from looking back. This is why initiates will not glance over their shoulder as they walk away. Backward is the world that they have left behind. The community then feasts with the new men, celebrating not just survival of pain, but the emergence of belonging, responsibility, and social recognition. Hold up. Before we go any deeper into these secrets, make sure you hit the like button. It helps the video get to more people who need to know the truth. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, subscribe and turn on notifications because trust me, there's way more to uncover. And also, check the description below. We've linked references, research, and links with exclusive material so you can see the evidence for yourself. Alright, now back to the investigation, and trust me, what's coming next is even more shocking. By this point, it's clear that initiation is not just the ceremony, It's a gateway into social existence. And this is where the contradiction hardens, because in many Southern African cultures, particularly among the Xhosa, Sotho, and Hlubi communities, not going through initiation carries consequences that reach far beyond personal choice. Initiation is what gives a man belonging, legitimacy, and a voice. It reinforces community bonds, defines social identity, and formally marks entry into manhood. Among the Xhosa, an initiate man gains the right to own cattle, inherit property, commune with ancestors, marry, and represent his family. Without institution, these doors remain closed regardless of age, education, or economic success. Respect itself is conditional. Researchers like Horner and the Brett note that initiated men are treated as full social actors, while uninitiated males, even older ones, are regarded as children. Their opinions are dismissed, their presence is tolerated, not respected. This is where pressure enters the ritual. Uninitiated males are denied access into male knowledge systems, teachings passed down during seclusion that cover social conduct, courtship, marriage, civil responsibilities, language use, and ritual etiquette. The logic is simple and unforgiving. If you don't endure the process, you haven't earned the knowledge. Isolation, thirst, silence, and pain are framed as proof of readiness, and crucially, there is no alternative pathway to earn this status. Mavundla argues that because initiation is the only recognized route into manhood, uninitiated males face direct and indirect coercion. Their voices are excluded from community discussions, their masculinity is questioned, their adulthood is denied. In some communities, women are forbidden from dating or marrying uninitiated men. Refusal doesn't just affect the individual, it stains the family name. According to Mavundla, failure to undergo initiation can bring shame and dishonor, disqualify men from inheritance, and even lead to forced migration, leaving the community to start life elsewhere under anonymity. And the stigma follows. Uninitiated men are stereotyped as lazy, dishonest, immature, and socially inferior. They experience sustained discrimination, limited economic opportunity, and reduced political influence. Their dignity becomes a legitimate target. This is the tension that modern South Africa can't escape, because the same system that grants identity and belonging is also the system under which hundreds of men are injured or die every initiation season. Medical literature and government reports document deaths from sepsis, dehydration, hemorrhage, gangrene, and botched circumcision, often performed by untrained practitioners in unhygienic conditions. Here, tradition collides with biology. Reform efforts, medical circumcision, regulated initiation schools, legal oversight are often resisted because they are perceived as stripping the ritual of its meaning. If pain, isolation, and risk are removed, some urge the transformation loses its legitimacy. But critics counter with an equally difficult truth. When refusal to attend means social death, then choice becomes an illusion. Initiation is not senseless violence, but neither is it harmless tradition. It creates men and it breaks bodies. It grants dignity and it enforces silence. It binds communities and it punishes refusal. This is the unresolved fracture at the heart of circumcision in Southern Africa. How do we protect life without dismantling meaning? And who gets to decide where culture ends and harm begins? At some point, the state steps in, and not because it wants to rewrite culture, but because boys keep dying. Every initiation season in South Africa, hospitals admit young men suffering from delayed wound healing, severe infections, swelling, lacerations, keloid scarring, and in extreme cases, gangrene and amputation. Deaths are reported annually across the Eastern and Western Cape, often linked to dehydration, sepsis, and uncontrolled bleeding. These are not abstract risks. They are predictable outcomes of improper surgical technique, unsafe aftercare, and unregulated authority. Medical research and government investigations consistently point to the same causes. Unsterilized blades reused across initiates enable the transmission of HIV and hepatitis B. Inexperienced Ingcibi may remove too much or too little foreskin, leading to scarring or catastrophic injury. In some cases, severe mutilation requires penile amputation. And even then, the initiate may still die from hemorrhage. Aftercare often worsens the damage.
Into endayifundayo qha kuba kuluza ubutata bam qha. Yawo qha.
Amakhankatha, the guardians trusted with healing, may bandage the wounds too tightly, cutting off a blood supply and causing ischemia. Others clean wounds improperly, allowing infections to spread. Alcohol and marijuana use among caregivers has been repeatedly reported, furthering the compromising care. And layered over all of this intentional dehydration, boys are discouraged from drinking water to dry the wound. Despite the clear medical danger, dehydration, delirium, and collapse are common outcomes. None of this is accidental, it's systematic. Now, let's speak about the urbanization that breaks the old model. The ritual was designed for rural seclusion, but South Africa is no longer rural. Mass migration from the Eastern Cape to urban centers like Cape Town has fractured the conditions that once sustained initiation schools. Townships such as Khayelitsha, home to between 500,000 and 1 million residents, now host large Bantu populations without access to land, privacy, or safe initiation spaces. In response, the city of Cape Town intervened. By 2009, formal initiation sites were declared a municipal priority. An initiation task team was formed, bringing together elders, traditional surgeons, health officials, and government representatives. Their goals were practical: land allocation, sanitation, infrastructure, and training for traditional surgeons and nurses. By 2010, 11 official initiation sites were designated across Cape Town, and still, every season, complications continue. Case studies like the Langa Institution site revealed persistent failures, poor sanitation, unsafe locations, conflict between cultural groups, and breakdowns in accountability. The ritual has not fully adapted to urban reality, and the boys pay a price for that lag. This is where the clinics enter the mountain, where the reframe becomes controversial. Because of the rising HIV infections linked to blade reuse, health authorities began recommending clinical circumcisions first, followed by symbolic traditional rites. The compromise is that the clinic performs the circumcision safely. The traditional surgeon later makes a small ceremonial cut, applies the leaf dressing, and the initiate still goes to the mountain for the guidance, discipline, and moral teachings. To the state, this is harm reduction, but to many traditionalists, it's dilution. For some Xhosa communities, a man circumcised in a hospital is not fully a man because he relies on pills, injections, and biometrical intervention. Medicine is seen not as protection, but as contamination of the ritual's spiritual logic. So the question sharpens: if the body survives but the meaning shifts, what exactly has been saved? So At this point, you're probably asking, why does circumcision still matter? It would be easy to reduce circumcision to danger statistics and policy failures. That would be a mistake because people don't defend initiation fiercely unless it carries something deeper. Circumcision is not an ID card, it's not paperwork, it's not a social transformation. A man is recognized not because the state says so, but because his community treats him differently. Respect changes, speech changes, expectations change. So initiation teaches boys how to walk, how to speak, how to listen and carry themselves, how to address elders, how to treat women, and how to control anger, how to move through spaces as someone who represents a family, not just himself. And the thing is, the silence persists. The secrecy outsiders criticize is not incidental, it's structural. Silence protects the authority of the elders, it protects the cohesion of the group, and it protects the men from being labeled as traitors, outcasts, or cowards. Speaking out risks exile, social if not physical. But that's why abuse can hide, that's why neglect persists, and that's why preventable deaths repeat. And yet, boys still want to go. They are excited. The mountain is framed as honor, not danger. Younger brothers watch older ones return as men. The cycle reinforces itself. This is not coercion by force, it is coercion by belonging. And at its core, the modern conflict around circumcision is about who has authority over the body. The state claims a duty to protect life. The community claims a right to shape identity. The initiate often has no language to refuse either. When everything used in the ritual is burned, the hut, the blankets, the utensils, and the initiate walks back with a shaven head, red clay on his face, and new clothes on his body, the message is clear. The boy is gone. The man belongs to the group. That is why circumcision still matters, and that is why it remains contested. Not because people don't know the risk, but because for many, life without recognition is not fully life at all. As cultures change and people learn more, the question isn't whether initiation should end, it's whether it can keep its meaning without secrecy. Because tradition isn't what we repeat forever, it's what we decide is worth carrying forward. And maybe becoming a man was never just about enduring pain, but about deciding what kind of future you're willing to inherit. This is the Need to Know channel, and thank you.